Beyoncé takes the stage and makes this symbol. Jay-Z also repeated it, and Rihanna did it in front of 100 million people at the Super Bowl. Is it just a pose? Or are they sending a message that only some understand? Some say it's simply a diamond, but a diamond points downward. This is more like a pyramid. And it's not the only symbol. Many celebrities cover one eye. Katy Perry, Eminem, Kanye West, Miley Cyrus, Lady Gaga, and they do it repeatedly in videos, album covers, and concerts. Coincidence? Or perhaps an instruction, a ritual? The pyramid, the all-seeing eye. These are ancient symbols linked to a secret elite that the church tried to erase from history, the Illuminati. Some say they disappeared. Others claim they never left, that they're still there, controlling the world from the shadows. That's why so many celebrities repeat these gestures, because they didn't rise to the top alone. The Illuminati put them there, but in exchange, they had to give up something, their souls. They say these signals aren't just poses, but reminders of whom they owe everything to. The idea that the Illuminati are still active today became very popular, especially after the movie Angels and Demons. But how true is this? Today, we're going to investigate. How were the Illuminati formed? What was their purpose? And how far did the church go to try to eliminate them? We'll explore what history and the system have tried to keep hidden, and you'll be surprised because there are documents, testimonies, and accusations showing the Illuminati continued operating long after people think they stopped. And not only that, some claim they orchestrated one of the most radical events in modern history from the shadows. So, before asking if they're still active today, we first need to ask, did they ever really leave? The Pope has died. Thousands gather in St. Peter's Square to bid him farewell. His body moves forward in a procession, followed by the Preferiti, the cardinals with the highest chances of taking his place. In a few days, the conclave, the secret vote to elect the new leader of the church, will begin. A leader who will face an urgent challenge, restoring faith in a world that no longer seeks answers in God, but in science. Meanwhile, in a lab in Switzerland, Dr. Victoria Vetra and the scientist priest Silvano Benevolio have just produced something that could change history: antimatter. A single drop has the power of a nuclear bomb. It's not just a scientific achievement, but a potential weapon of mass destruction. Silvano looks at it, sighs, and says, "Now we're in God's hands." Victoria goes to check the antimatter container, approaches the scanner, and the machine analyzes her iris, granting access. But as she steps away, she feels something strange, blood on her chin. She crosses the door and then sees it, an eye lying on the floor. She looks for Silvano and finds him, dead, without an eye. Meanwhile, Robert Langdon, a professor of religious symbolism, is calmly swimming until a man in a suit approaches him, wearing a pin. Langdon sees it and freezes. Two crossed keys under a papal crown, the symbol of the Vatican. He's come to request his urgent help and shows him a note. Langdon is alarmed. That symbol has been considered a myth for over 400 years. According to legend, it was created in the 10th century by a member of the Illuminati. It's an impossible design, an ambigram, a word that reads the same forward and backward, a tribute to Galileo's love for symmetry. But it wasn't just a visual game. It was a warning, because that symbol would only be revealed when the Illuminati had enough power to return and complete their mission. Vincenzi, the Vatican's representative, explains they sought him out because he wrote the book The Art of the Illuminati. However, Langdon, annoyed, retorts that the book could only be part one. The Vatican denied him access to their secret archives, and without that, he couldn't tell the full story. Langdon examines the symbol again and comments that someone wants to make them believe the Illuminati have returned to Rome. Vincenzi sighs and reveals that 4 cardinals have been kidnapped and received a threat. They will be publicly executed, 1 per hour. The first execution will be tonight at 8 p.m. It's not just about making them believe. It's that the Illuminati have truly returned. The conclave was supposed to start today, but they've been postponing it. They can't keep doing so for long without people starting to suspect something's wrong. They need Langdon to help analyze the clues and track down those responsible before it's too late. They board a private jet and head to Rome. Vincenzi comments that they'll hunt the Illuminati with everything they have and, if necessary, eliminate them. But Langdon stops him. The Illuminati weren't violent until the church pressured them to be. He explains that the Illuminati were, at their core, a group of enlightened physicists, mathematicians, and astronomers. They weren't against religion. They just wanted the church's teachings not to contradict what science had already proven. And of course, that didn't sit well with the church, so they did exactly what Vincenzi just proposed. They hunted and eliminated them. That forced them to hide and become a secret society. Of what Langdon just said, what's true, what's false? To start, he's right about something. The word Illuminati simply means the enlightened in Latin. People who supposedly received special wisdom or hidden truth. But the Illuminati aren't as unique as they seem. Throughout history, there have been countless groups claiming the same, that they had access to essential, exclusive revelations. In ancient Greece, there were the Pythagoreans, who believed numbers were divine symbols, that everything in the universe followed a mathematical order. and that only they could understand it. Later came the Orphics, who spoke of the soul's reincarnation and used rituals to reach a higher truth. Then the Gnostics arrived, saying the material world was a prison and that only those who attained gnosis, a secret wisdom, could liberate themselves. Around 1400, in Europe, especially Italy, other similar groups began to emerge. But unlike the previous ones, they didn't seek truth in rituals or religion but in reason, philosophy, mathematics, and a still primitive science. They weren't secret societies but open intellectual circles where they gathered to discuss ideas that, in their time, were scandalous. What if humans aren't here just to serve God? What if truth doesn't come from the Bible but from reason? What if diseases aren't divine punishments but bodily failures? And of course, for the church of that era, these discussions were a threat because they not only questioned faith but also its authority. And so began a conflict between the church and science that, over time, led to persecutions, trials, and death. Upon arriving in Rome, Commander Olivetti, head of the Vatican police, receives them. His team handles security, with one exception, the Pope's personal protection, which falls solely to the Swiss Guard. They take Langdon to some offices, where Dr. Vetra joins him, as they've just received a new threat, a video where the Illuminati confess they have the antimatter container. Vetra explains that antimatter is a way to study the universe's origins, to isolate the God particle, named so because it's believed to be responsible for giving mass to all matter, the key to the Big Bang. Richter, the Swiss Guard commander, is offended. How dare they say a particle, not God, created the universe? That's blasphemy. Still, Vetra continues, explaining that the antimatter is suspended in a space container, but if the battery dies and it touches any surface, like the container's bottom, the contact would cause a massive explosion. The battery runs out at midnight. If they don't recover it before then, the result will be catastrophic. Langdon analyzes it and says, the Vatican would be consumed by light. Richter freezes. That was exactly the phrase the Illuminati used. They show the video they received. The 4 kidnapped cardinals appear, and a voice threatens, we will destroy your 4 pillars. We will mark your preferiti and sacrifice them on the altar of science, and then bring your church down upon you. The Vatican will be consumed by light, a bright star at the end of the path to illumination. Langdon takes a deep breath. That has always been the Illuminati's threat, to destroy the church through light. The 4 pillars they mention are the 4 preferiti, the cardinals most likely to become pope. Marking them isn't a metaphor, but another Illuminati legend. It's said there are 5 types of marks. The first 4 represent the fundamental elements of science: earth, air, fire, and water. The 5th remains a mystery. The fact that they'll be publicly executed isn't a coincidence, but a revenge for what happened during the Purge in 1668. The church captured 4 Illuminati scientists, marked them on the chest with the cross symbol as a supposed sign of surrender, and then executed them, dumping their bodies in the street to send a message. The church is not to be questioned, especially on scientific matters. This act radicalized the Illuminati, pushing them to become darker and more violent, waiting for their moment to take revenge. Now, centuries later, they've found the perfect way, using antimatter and technology so science literally destroys religion. Is what Langdon just said true? The Purge, as depicted in the movie, never happened. It's a fictional event the author invented to represent something that did occur in real life, the violent reaction the church had against those who contradicted it. After the philosophical debates that emerged in Italy around 1400, the way many Europeans understood the world changed completely. They no longer believed God was the absolute center of the universe, knowledge, or the meaning of life. Instead, the focus shifted to humans, their emotions, capacities, and place in the world. With that change, curiosity grew to understand reality, not through the Bible, but through reason, observation, and experiment. In medicine, some began ignoring church restrictions and started dissecting cadavers to study the human body, discovering that many ideas accepted by the church at the time were deeply flawed. In astronomy, they noticed that, contrary to the Bible, Earth didn't seem to be the universe's center. And so, little by little, science began stripping the church of its monopoly on truth. As expected, this wasn't well received. One of the most famous cases is that of Giordano Bruno, a Dominican monk who claimed Earth revolved around the sun and that the universe was infinite, filled with other worlds. He was accused of heresy and burned alive in a public square in Rome. Another case is Michael Servetus, a doctor who discovered how pulmonary blood circulation works. He was also burned alive with green wood to prolong his death. These are just some of the more dramatic stories of scientists who were eliminated. But some clarifications are needed. Bruno wasn't executed for doing science. Some of his ideas turned out to be true, but he didn't obtain them through observation or experiments. He claimed to have received them in mystical visions. So, technically, he wasn't a scientist. Second, his execution wasn't so much for what he said about the universe, but for denying central Christian doctrines like the divinity of Christ and the Trinity. Third, Servetus was similar. He was a doctor, but but he wasn't executed for his scientific discoveries, but for rejecting the Trinity. Fourth, it wasn't even the Catholic Church that condemned him, but the Protestant Calvinists in Geneva. So, it's important to clarify that while it's often said the Catholic Church eliminated scientists, the real history is more nuanced. It's true the Inquisition existed, a period when the Church persecuted and executed many people, but most cases weren't about doing science but heresy, denying dogmas, practicing another religion, or being accused of witchcraft or Satanism. Yes, there was censorship. The Church burned books, banned ideas, and punished several thinkers, but cases where someone was eliminated solely for their scientific discoveries are very rare. The most common was pressuring them or demanding they retract, as happened with Galileo Galilei. Langdon reviews the message, and a phrase catches his attention: a bright star at the end of the path to illumination. Is he sure this clue could lead them to stop all this? He requests access to the Vatican's secret archives. Richter stops him. This isn't an opportunity to advance your career. Langdon clarifies it has nothing to do with his book. The path to illumination is real, a secret route through Rome leading to the Church of Illumination, where the Illuminati met in secret. Those archives might hold a clue to finding the route. Richter responds that to gain access, he must speak with Patrick McKenna, the Camerlengo, the man temporarily governing the Vatican while a new pope is elected. They meet him, and he's not some powerful cardinal, just an ordinary priest. But the pope wanted him as a son. He grants them access to the secret archives. Langdon explains to Vetra what they're looking for: a book written by Galileo Galilei, the founder of the Illuminati, who was also deeply Catholic. Galileo didn't believe science and religion were enemies. On the contrary, he thought they told the same story, just in different languages. His dream was to found a Church of Illumination where all who thought like him could unite. But since he couldn't reveal its location publicly, lest it unleash the Church's fury, he left a secret path full of clues. A companion, whose identity remains a mystery, helped him, designing 4 sculptures, each representing one of the 4 elements of science: earth, air, fire, and water. He placed them in front of different churches in Rome, each containing a clue leading to the next. At the end of the route was the Church of Illumination. The most interesting part? Those churches marked with sculptures were called the altars of science, exactly the term used in the threat. The cardinals will be sacrificed on the altar of science. If they can find those sculptures, they might anticipate where the murders will occur and perhaps stop them. Galileo Galilei was an astronomer, physicist, and mathematician, one of the pioneers of modern science. In the early 1600s, he used a telescope, then a totally new invention, to observe the sky and confirm something that contradicted church teachings. Earth wasn't the center of the universe, it revolved around the sun. That was a scandal. Not only did it contradict the Bible, but it shattered the idea that humans occupied a special place in the cosmos, that we weren't the center of creation. The church accused him of heresy, forced him to retract publicly, and as punishment, sentenced him to house arrest, where he spent the rest of his life. The fact that he challenged the church, spent his final years isolated, and was a genius ahead of his time fueled the legend that he was the founder of the Illuminati, a society of scientists and mathematicians who, unable to speak freely, began operating from the shadows, seeking to weaken the church's power and defend science and freedom of thought. Though this story might sound fascinating, the truth is there's no evidence of this. No letters, documents, or testimonies from his time suggest Galileo was part of such a group, let alone founded it. So, does this mean the Illuminati never existed? Of course they existed, and some say they still operate today, but their goal wasn't to protect science, but to control power to create a new world order. Patrick learns that Cardinal Strauss, in charge of organizing the conclave, has decided to proceed with the process. He tries to convince him to cancel it, but Strauss ignores him completely. Meanwhile, the captor receives a message: the payment has been confirmed. He heads to where he's keeping the cardinals captive. They confront him, saying God won't forgive him. He looks at them and replies, "If God has a problem with me, it's not for what I did but for what I'm about to do." He lights a fire and begins heating a branding iron. After much waiting, Langdon finally accesses the Vatican's secret archives. There, they find what they were looking for: the diagram of truth, a text Galileo wrote in secret. Langdon explains to Vetra that when the church forced him to retract publicly, Galileo obeyed, but only symbolically. In private, he left this book detailing his true thoughts. They review the pages and find a symbol: the all-seeing eye, with an inscription: "The path of light is traced," the sacred text. Vetra checks the time: 20 minutes until the first murder. Without thinking, she tears out the page. Langdon is paralyzed, but there's no time to argue. In the car, they read the full poem. From the earthly tomb of Santi, with the demon's hole, cross Rome where the mystic elements reveal: the path of light is traced, the sacred text. May the angels guide you in your lofty quest. Langdon analyzes the phrase, "from the earthly tomb of Santi." That must be the starting point. But who is Santi? Perhaps Raphael Santi, the famous Renaissance artist. Where is he buried? The Pantheon. They head there directly, find his tomb, but there's a problem. Raphael was buried there long after Galileo's death, so it can't be the tomb the poem refers to. Then Langdon makes the connection. They're not looking for his current tomb, but a church where Raphael worked, the Chapel of Earth, the first element. They hurry there. In front of the church, another sign, an obelisk, one of the Illuminati's favorite symbols. If a murder is to happen, it'll be here. 1 minute left. They enter, searching for the right chapel. None have signs, but one is decorated with pyramids. Langdon doesn't hesitate. He approaches and finds a trapdoor on the floor. They open it, descend to the basement, and there's one of the cardinals, dead, marked with the word Earth. Langdon observes the chapel was designed by Raphael, but the sculptures aren't his, they're by Bernini. And if he was Galileo's secret collaborator, the one who helped build the path to illumination, it sounds unlikely. Bernini worked very closely with the church, but maybe that's why it makes sense. No one would suspect him. He keeps exploring and finds a sculpture, Habakkuk and the angel, the prophet who announced the earth's destruction. The angel extends an arm, pointing southwest. Langdon recalls, "May the angels guide you in your lofty quest." He's convinced, that's the sign. If the first element was earth, now comes air. They need to find another Bernini sculpture related to air in a church to the southwest. Langdon climbs to the roof and sees it, St. Peter's Square, designed by Bernini. The second marker must be there. Here, the movie's plot begins to wobble. At first, they present the Illuminati as a group of scientists, mathematicians, and defenders of rational thought. But suddenly it all revolves around sculptures, poems, and Renaissance artists like Bernini and Raphael. Where did the scientists go? Then there's the path to illumination. According to the movie, this secret path can be followed thanks to statues pointing in a specific direction, and it suggests Langdon, 400 years later, finds those statues exactly where they were, pointing the same way. Really? No one moved them in 4 centuries. No restoration, no slight change of place. But setting that aside, the most important thing is that the movie proposes an origin for the Illuminati that has nothing to do with the real one. The film insists the Illuminati were a group of scientists and mathematicians who initially only wanted the church to accept scientific advances, but the real history is very different. To begin, their founder, Adam Weishaupt, wasn't a scientist or mathematician, but a lawyer. His goal wasn't to defend science, but to establish a new world order, a kind of universal republic. But to achieve that, he believed it was necessary to eliminate both Christianity and governments. However, Weishaupt didn't seek power for himself, but to liberate humanity. He wanted to create a fairer society without social classes, kings, or wars between countries, a world where goods were shared and religions disappeared because, according to him, they only served to divide and manipulate. Basically, something very similar to communism. But Weishaupt knew people are hard to convince. Good ideas aren't enough. You have to know how to sell them. And so, he found a human weakness. Everyone likes to feel special, part of something exclusive. If you offer people access to secrets, real or invented, it's much easier to gain their attention, trust, and even obedience. You can guide them without them realizing it. He himself wrote, "Of all the means I know to lead men, the most effective is a hidden mystery. The mind's curiosity is irresistible. I will use that human weakness, but for a good end, the well-being of humanity." With that in mind, he sought an existing secret society to use as a facade and chose the Freemasons. He joined a local lodge and began spreading his ideas, recruiting followers. As the group grew, they infiltrated literary and social circles to influence what people thought. At the same time, they manipulated the media. If an author published something that didn't align with their agenda, they tried to recruit them, and if they couldn't, they destroyed them. They infiltrated schools, made people believe they agreed with their ideas, and once they joined the Illuminati, they gradually changed their way of thinking. They even tried to win over women because, according to Weishaupt, there's no more powerful way to influence men than through women. They promised emancipation and freedom, but the world Weishaupt had in mind remained a male-dominated one. So, when people today talk about the Illuminati having a secret agenda, controlling everything from the shadows and manipulating media, governments, and individuals, it's not just an invention. It's exactly what their founder planned. And according to some, that plan never stopped. It just became harder to see. In a moment, we'll see why. They arrive at the square. Langdon lowers his gaze and finds it, the angel of the west wind. It has to be there. He scans the crowd, searching for the captor. Then the bell tolls. It's 9 p.m., and suddenly, a scream. A girl has found the cardinal, bleeding, with the word air on his chest. Next to the body is a note. From his walls, we took his life. With the solution of man, we stopped his heart. With his own needle, we pierced his impious veil. The Illuminati aren't just eliminating cardinals. They also killed the Pope. Olivetti asks if the Pope received injected medications. Patrick says he took tenzaprin daily. Vetra intervenes, in incorrect doses, that anticoagulant can cause massive internal bleeding. The body would seem to have suffered a heart attack, but it would actually be hemorrhaging internally. Patrick asks Langdon to continue his search. For that, he must review the archives again. Meanwhile, Vetra decides to check Silvano's journal. Maybe he left a clue about who else knew about the antimatter project. Patrick finds her flipping through it and asks, how would they know if the Pope died from an overdose? She responds that the tongue and mouth would turn black. It's unmistakable. Patrick needs to know the truth. He descends to the crypt to see the body with his own eyes. On the way, he confesses to Vetra that he was orphaned at 9. A cardinal took pity on him and adopted him as a son. That cardinal was the Pope. Meanwhile, Langdon searches for a Bernini work related to fire and finds it, The Ecstasy of Saint Teresa. An angel pierces the saint's chest with a flaming lance, igniting a divine fire. It must be there. Patrick reaches the coffin, kneels, prays quietly. You taught me to do what's right, no matter how much it hurts. Then they remove the lid. The face is blackened, the tongue swollen. He was definitely murdered. Vetra returns for Silvano's journals, but they're gone. Someone took them. Patrick breaks protocol and enters the conclave, informing them that the Pope was murdered, that the church is under attack from an ancient enemy, the Illuminati, a group that has sabotaged them from within, eliminating in the name of their god, science. Langdon, Olivetti, and the police arrive at the church, open the door, and see it. A cardinal hanging in a crucified pose, burning. They run toward him, but before they can lower him, gunshots ring out. The captor is there. They have to run and hide. One by one, they fall. The only one to escape is Langdon. Vetra, meanwhile, seeks Richter and discovers he has Silvano's journal. Why did he steal it? What is he hiding? Langdon tries to figure out the fourth altar of science. He pulls out a map, marks the 3 locations where murders have already occurred, and recalls the phrase, cross Rome, where the mystic elements reveal. Then he sees it. The points form a cross, literally crossing Rome. Only one element remains, water. There's a perfect fit, the Fountain of the 4 Rivers by Bernini. He runs to the fountain, and upon arriving, confirms it. An obelisk in the center, a dove at the top, the angel of peace, looking east. But before he can act, a van stops. A cardinal, tied to a handcart, is thrown into the water. Langdon, with the help of tourists, manages to pull him out in time. It's Cardinal Baggia. Barely able to speak, he says, Castel Sant'Angelo. Of course, the Castle of the Angel. That's where the Church of Illumination and the antimatter container must be. Returning to Weishaupt's story, his Illuminati gained more and more power, expanding across Europe, from Italy to Denmark, Poland to Paris. Some say they had 450 members, others claim nearly 2,000. However, in 1784, the Bavarian government considered them a threat to the state and ordered their dissolution. They shut down their lodges, confiscated their documents, and began pursuing their leaders. Weishaupt had to flee and live the rest of his life in exile. Officially, the Illuminati ceased to exist. But did they really disappear? After that first order, the government banned them again in 1785, 1787, and once more in 1790, meaning they continued operating in the shadows. And there's something more unsettling. Those bans only applied in Bavaria. In the rest of Europe, where they had already infiltrated, there were no restrictions. They could have kept moving from France, Italy, or anywhere else. In fact, in 1789, the same year the French Revolution broke out, denunciations began circulating in France, claiming the Illuminati had infiltrated Masonic circles, intellectual groups, and key political factions. A few years later, in 1797, Scottish scientist John Robinson published a book directly accusing the Illuminati of manipulating the French Revolution from the shadows. He wasn't just any conspiracy theorist. Robinson was a university professor, a member of the Royal Society, and a Freemason. According to him, he witnessed the infiltration of Illuminati members in his own lodge and had access to real documents and testimonies confiscated by the Bavarian government. So, at least there's evidence they didn't disappear as quickly as we've been led to believe. They remained active years after their official dissolution, and according to some, they not only survived but pushed one of the most radical events in modern history. And if that's true, what else did they orchestrate without anyone noticing? And what if they never left? Langdon, Vetra, and the police rushed to Castel Sant'Angelo. She comments that Richter stole Silvano's journal. They can't trust him. Langdon connects it all. That's how they killed the Pope. The Illuminati infiltrated the Swiss Guard. Upon arriving at the castle, they begin exploring, and Langdon notices all the angel sculptures point in the same direction, the basement. They descend and find a star-shaped stone with an eye carved in the center. Following the tip, they discover a secret passage connecting directly to the Vatican. The captor is packing his things when he receives a message. The car is ready, keys hidden in the front tire. Langdon and Vetra keep exploring and finally reach the place they've been seeking, the Church of Illumination. But they're not alone. The captor is there, hidden, watching them. Langdon inspects the place, finds the branding irons used to mark the cardinals, the 4 elements, and one more. Two crossed keys, the Pope's symbol. Before destroying the Vatican, they'll destroy the Pope. And if there's no Pope, the target is the Camerlengo. They decide to call him, but at that moment, the captor appears, aims his gun, and orders them to throw the phone into the fire. He says, when they call me, they always make sure to say it's God's will. He clarifies he won't kill them. They weren't paid to do that, and warns them. Be careful. These are men of God. Meanwhile, Patrick is praying in his room when Richter enters and closes the door. The captor follows his contractor's instructions, gets in the car, starts the engine, and in seconds, it explodes in flames. He wasn't going to leave any loose ends. Langdon runs through the tunnels until he reaches the Vatican, heading straight to the Camerlengo's room. He finds him on the floor, Richter on top with a gun in hand. Patrick screams for help to save him. The police don't hesitate. They shoot Richter. With his last strength, Richter opens his hand, revealing a key. Langdon doesn't know what it means, but takes it. Patrick shows them the mark he received, the Pope's symbol, reversed. They immediately think of St. Peter, the first Pope, crucified upside down, buried right beneath the Vatican. Langdon recalls the threat. We will bring your church down upon you. They run to St. Peter's tomb, and there it is, the antimatter container. They have only minutes before the battery dies. Vetra tries to replace it, but realizes there's not enough time. Then Patrick makes a decision. He grabs the capsule, boards a helicopter, and takes off, weighing his cross, offering a prayer, and rising as high as he can so no one else gets hurt. The container explodes. The sky lights up, there's chaos, but no victims except Patrick. Until suddenly, a parachute approaches. He's alive. The crowd erupts in applause, hailing him as a hero, a saint. At the Vatican, the cardinals receive the news. Patrick saved everyone. Then someone suggests, what if he were the next pope? He's not a cardinal and doesn't meet the age requirement. But there's an exception, election by adoration. If the Holy Spirit illuminates them and they all shout his name at the same time, he could be chosen. Meanwhile, Vetra searches Richter's desk for the notebooks he stole. She finds a hidden compartment with a space for a key. Perhaps Richter was trying to warn them of something. Langdon uses the key, opens it, and surveillance cameras appear. They review the footage. Patrick is in the room when Richter enters and confronts him. He read Silvano's notebooks, and Patrick's name appears too many times. He knew about the discovery of the God particle. The Camerlengo, furious, shouts, "That's sacrilege." At that moment, Richter understands. Patrick orchestrated it all. He killed the Pope and invented the Illuminati's return to sow fear in science, forcing the world back to faith. Despite being exposed, Patrick continues his plan. He takes a red-hot iron, brands himself, and collapses, screaming. Just then, Langdon and the police enter. Patrick points to Richter, and the police, without hesitation, take him down. Langdon realizes they've made a grave mistake. He quickly calls the cardinals and shows them the footage. When Patrick arrives at the Sistine Chapel, everyone knows the truth. The cardinals stare at him, and he understands he's been exposed. He makes a decision, sets himself on fire, and with that, ends his life. Days later, the conclave elects a new leader, Cardinal Baggia, the one Langdon saved at the fountain. As a gesture of gratitude, they give Langdon Galileo's original text, the Diagram of Truth, so he can finish his book. Baggia chooses his papal name, Luke, in honor of the evangelist who was also a doctor, a message to the world to seek harmony between faith and science. Do the Illuminati still exist today? They're an elite manipulating the world from the shadows. Though they remained active for a time after being dissolved, that was nearly 300 years ago. Since then, there's no evidence the group has continued to exist or operate in secret. Experts like Richard Spence and Mark Finster agree there's no real basis to think they're still functioning, let alone controlling the world. But then why do so many people still believe it? First, because there is a real historical basis, as we saw in this video. Yes, a group called the Illuminati existed. Yes, they sought to transform the political and social order. Yes, they operated in secret and infiltrated institutions. Yes, they remained active for a time after their official dissolution. And yes, they were linked to significant events like the French Revolution. In short, at one point, they were real. But second, because the Illuminati fit perfectly with the fears of the modern world. Today, we live surrounded by algorithms deciding what we see and don't, laws created by politicians we never see, incomprehensible tax systems, personal data collected without knowing how, central banks managing the global economy, elections manipulated by invisible social media campaigns, medications and vaccines developed by opaque corporations, and fake news mixed with half-truths. In a world like this, it's easy to feel lost. And when something isn't understood, the brain seeks answers. Sometimes, it's more comforting to think someone, even a secret elite, has control than to accept that no one does, that the world doesn't have a clear order but is deeply chaotic. The Illuminati offer just that, a simple, though absurd, narrative to make sense of what we don't understand, a way to calm the anxiety of not knowing who's making the decisions. So, it's no surprise so many still believe in them, because for many, it's more comforting to imagine an invisible force guiding the world's course than, I insist, accepting that no one is.